Welcome to Fred's Faith Soundings. This is the first volume in a project that may go on for quite a while. It's only number 2. I've made some decisions about how to do this program, but it could change because really I'm not being paid to do this, and I'm never going to accept any remuneration of any kind for doing this. So I'm only doing it for my own satisfaction and for what I believe, but cannot prove to be God's will for me at this moment. And I'm hoping that it might do some good for at least one person for maybe 10 or 12 words that I say. But the main reason is that I feel this is the best thing right now I have to offer the world. I got a Master of Divinity from a respectable seminary, and I practiced professional Christian ministry for 5 years. And that ended many years ago. But I never stopped thinking about God, what God might be like, what I believe God to be, how I believe God is calling me to be, and everyone else. So each of us has to answer the question, how would God ask us to take our next step? And the next step I'm being asked to do is do this program tonight. Last time, if you tuned in, you saw typewritten notes. And this time you see my sloppy handwriting. And here's the sum total of the notes I've prepared for tonight. A blank page. So what's actually going to happen, unlike the first essay, is I'm going to make this completely extemporaneous speech. Speech isn't the right word. I want this to be my part of a conversation. And so few people are listening, and so even fewer will respond. I nevertheless will never promise to answer any responses that you might send. I'm not creating a YouTube channel. I have no desire to monetize this project. I have no desire to ever accept any kind of advertising. And I never promise to keep up with all the comments that might come to me. But I will try to read them all. And I don't expect it will be hard, because I don't expect my audience to grow. One of the reasons I don't expect it to grow is because I'm not doing all the work that a project like this deserves. As you can see, it's low tech to the max. And as you'll note as we go along, it's sometimes disorganized. I don't bring in the great thoughts of other people very often. I don't have any visuals. You're not seeing my face. And any thought that comes out of my mouth is always going to be limited. And I stand undeservedly on the shoulders of many who have thought everything I'm ever going to say and far, far more. It's already been done, already been written, already been said. But perhaps someone might listen to me who might not read or listen to others who have those important thoughts. And so maybe there is some purpose to my project that goes beyond my desire to serve the God I believe in and can't prove, and the will of that God for me as I discern it properly or improperly. So I'm going to make this extemporaneous, and I'm going to write things as we go along. But I don't know about you, but when I write, I do a lot of crossouts. I do a lot of rewriting. And I recognize this, so I put a lot of thought into this. I've been thinking about this for every day since my last video essay, which was probably about 6 weeks ago. But only in the last 2 weeks did I decide to pick on a subject. This particular one I've entitled Faith and 9/11. And so only for these past 2 weeks have I been thinking every day about what I might say. So it's extemporaneous, but it's not without thought. I've even jotted notes. In fact, I've got notes for many more talks, and some are almost fully developed. But I'd rather try this, and maybe I won't continue with it. I don't know. That's the beauty of being your own boss and doing your own project and not having to impress anybody with it. I can just go where I want to go. I've jotted down the time that I started. I have a clock next to me, which is kind of foolish because I'm recording this video and it's counting down the time as it progresses. So I didn't have to drag the clock over here. So it just goes to show you how I'm learning on the fly. And I've thought about all this, you know. I'm a thinker. And I've realized that making mistakes and learning on the fly and looking foolish is something I'd like to share with you. I'd like to share with you tonight that the last 4 or 5 hours of this day, I was very distressed. In fact, I was very angry. In fact, I cried a little tears over something I did that wasn't very holy. No lasting damage done, nobody physically hurt. But I'm going to share with you, without getting into personal details that will only distract the more important purpose of this project. I'm going to share with you my faults and weaknesses. I'm going to present to you this sloppy thing and let you watch me grow and improve, hopefully. It reminds me of something the Apostle Paul said in the Christian tradition. I will boast of my weaknesses, because when I am weak, then I am strong. The idea being that he, in his best moments, realized he was not his goal, his purpose, his project was not to sell himself, but to promote his vision of God. And he realized that the kind of humility that comes when we recognize our weaknesses is the kind of humility that allows the light of God to shine. I said in my last video essay that I'm jotting down some notes here as we go. I'm going to ask you to join me in silence during these talks. If you're not in the mood to take the time, it's my understanding you can pause this thing. You can come back to it, YouTube some other day, and pick up where you left off. And so I'm not going to constrain myself to any particular format or length of time, although I should make a commitment to keeping it under 20 minutes. But I may not. I won't make that commitment. But that's kind of a loose goal. I'm an older guy who's suffering from some short-term memory loss, and I can't keep sometimes a long thought or a detour in memory long enough to pick up where I left off or where I started. So I may have some unfinished thoughts here, and I hope you'll forgive me for that. In fact, I think if we don't forgive each other for things and use our own intelligence to fill in where the weaknesses of others leave gaps, we'll never learn from each other. I'm listening to a deceased fellow whose radio programs are still being shared on the web. And there are times he says things with which I don't agree, but I know I'm getting something good from him. And it fits me, my needs right now. So if some people, however few, can say that about me, that's good enough. I'm a perfectionist. I hate to say it. I hope I'm wrong, but I think I am. And that's a hard thing to admit, but because there's no room for perfectionism when you're talking about God. There's no room for perfectionism when you're trying to deal with other people, because our thoughts and our words and our hearts are far from perfect. But I believe we're called to love each other. I believe that because I believe in a certain God. And you probably know already that could be loosely defined as the Christian God. We recognize that one Christian differs from another as to the exact dimensions and qualities of that God and that belief, but generally speaking, I'm a committed Christian, and that will never change. I was more open to changing and pressing the boundaries for many years. And although I still have a maverick strain in me, I know certain things have only grown stronger in me, will not change for the rest of my life. And one of those is my Christian belief. But I want to be quick to say that if you're not of the Christian persuasion, I'm still talking to you. There may be a time when this project evolves into a Christian ministry, and then I will be talking to a Christian audience. But until I actually make that declaration, I am, believe it or not, trying to speak to everyone in the world. I'm not limiting to myself to any particular kind of Christian. I'm not limiting myself to any particular Christian ministry. I'm not limiting myself to any particular religion. And I hope that even those who consider themselves completely unreligious might find something in my words that is interesting. So I'm always going to keep you in mind also. We have to wonder sometimes why we do what we do. And one thing I've learned is that we often think we're doing things because they make sense, because we make sense, because we're rational human beings. But what I have learned is that the mind is often trumped by the heart. So an example of that is if you were raised a certain way, or if in some time in your formative years, even if that's beyond older than what we might normally consider formative, if something really touched you deep down, which usually happens, before the age of 5 or 10 or 7 or whatever, those things will influence your thoughts. And you can build something that seems rational, and probably is, but the real reason you're building it is because of something deep in your soul that was put in there before you even realized it was being put in there. So I want to be open to people of other faiths and no faith at all without judgment. You will hear judgment from me. There's no doubt about that. I will judge people's thinking. I will judge people's attitudes. I will judge people's heartfelt beliefs. But I refuse to judge a person, a soul. Because I don't believe that we make ourselves who we are. We have something to do with it. We may have a lot to do with it. But there are too many ways and too many times and in too many depths that we are being and have been formed by our culture, our family, our parents, our caretakers, our schools, our institutions, the stories of our history, our genetics. The reason a person like me talks, however, is because I believe if we really try, we can more and more choose who we wish to become even in the face of such deeply ingrained personality and intellectual traits that we've inherited by social teaching or genetic makeup. The mind is a malleable thing, and one of the things that hurts me more than ever is so many people in our American society today are going into higher education for the purpose of earning a living. And so they, being faced with a highly technological and competitive world, they choose courses and studies which will prepare them for a career. What used to be I'm trying to write while I talk, which is not good. So just take a moment. You'll see misspellings and things that are hard to read. And I've got to learn to stay within the constraints of this feeble video system. I see what colleges are offering, and I see what students are taking and how they're thinking about their education, because I spent some time in education. And I see the trends and I read about them. And I see the demands on people, young people today, who wish to make a life. And I see that it's luring them away from the classical studies like literature, their native language, English. Here, and if you're a native-born American like me, history, theology, religion, philosophy. These were studies that a typical college grad would have been immersed, in which a typical college grad would have been immersed significantly, even 70, 80 years ago, and certainly before that. But over these past decades, it's changed. I've had the great opportunity to speak to an older philosophy of religion teacher, professor that I had during my college days, and I had the opportunity to speak to him as an old man, him being an old man, and him reflecting on decades of experience and being able to look back on his notes and saying to me, the students he deals with now are different. And it confirmed some of my thinking. Our technology changes us, in some very important ways. Anyway, I wanted to talk about 9/11. I've gone way over 20 minutes already. I promised at the end of the last video essay that I would talk about atheism today. But I am not going to be able to go into it much. And from now on, I'm not going to make any promises about what I'm going to, about that which I'm going to speak in my next essays. Because I really want this to be something fresh and from the heart, and from someone who is contemporary in the more ancient meaning of that word, to mean someone who's immersed in the times, the present time. And so I always want these essays to be fresh, something from my heart and mind. Fresh from the heart and mind of someone who reads and is very concerned about the world and himself and his family and friends. We celebrated. Like I said, there's a lot of cross-outs when I write, and I'm having trouble recalling words sometimes now. But we remembered the tragedy of 9/11 just a few weeks ago at the 20th anniversary of that event. And it got me to thinking about the strength of the atheist's argument. We put ourselves in the shoes of unfortunate people. If we really understand what they're going through, it can be very difficult to believe in a God who is all good and all powerful and all loving. That's what the atheist questions. How can you believe in a God who is all good, all powerful, and all loving? How can you believe in such a God? Put it here with a question mark, an exclamation mark, as if to say, this is ludicrous. You put yourself in the shoes of someone who was one of those upper floors of Tower 1 or Tower 2 or any of the several planes who went down that day, or the buildings, other buildings and places that were partially destroyed by kamikaze pilots. We put ourselves into the shoes of the victims of that day, the victims who are still suffering from that day, and the relatives and the loved ones of victims who were lost and who are suffering from that day. And I want to expand it, because there are 9/11s happening every day in this world, and the atheist knows it. The intellectual atheist asks this question with exclamation mark every day. How can you possibly believe in a good and all-powerful and all-loving God when people who have virtually no responsibility for the ills of those who attack them are nevertheless attacked mercilessly? And they cry out to God like the 2015 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, 30,000, pick a number. It could be any one of those. I keep forgetting. Children who die of malnutrition every day around the world. Each one of them, probably without the words, cries out like those who suffered from 9/11. How can there be a good God, a powerful God, or a loving God if this is allowed to happen? I'm really over time here, but I want to finish this thought. It may take a while, so hopefully you can tune in later if you don't have any time now. We can't rush away from this moment. When we're standing in the shoes of those who suffer, who cry out to God and hear no answer and get no miracle. And the atheist, in his or her intellectual responsibility, wants to stand with them. And for that, I applaud them. They're standing with the victims of evil. And they're crying out. And they refuse to be satisfied even when their own lives are going well, because they know that they don't really deserve their well-being any more than those little children starving or those 9/11 victims falling out of buildings deserve what they got. The atheist believes that life is more like a crapshoot. There is no God. There's no higher being, and there's no way to avoid the consequences of being human, because being human has no real reason or rhyme. We started with atoms colliding and forming compounds which got together, and somehow, this is the part that mystifies me, somehow those compounds organized into a living thing that reproduces itself. The other part that gets me is looking out at the size of the universe, and I wrote down a bunch of notes. I spent an hour one day hunting around for numbers and figures to impress you with the grandeur of the universe. It's unfathomable. And I just have to mention these two things. The one is this idea that life somehow came out of inorganic elements by itself, just banging together, and for reasons of only chemistry and physics can explain. It mystifies me. It seems ludicrous for anyone to believe that that could happen without what many scientists call intelligent design. Without an intelligent designer. The other thing that mystifies me, to me, faith does seem ludicrous given the suffering and evil in this world and the innocent victims it takes. But it's just as ludicrous to me to think that chemicals can somehow get together and get shocked by a bolt of lightning and somehow form compounds, and that's fine. I could see long chain proteins being formed, but I can't imagine that just by chance a living organism, even the smallest, tiniest, most primitive cell, could ever come out of that. To be so organized and to be able to reproduce itself and grow is just miraculous to me. The atheist thinks that he or she is so reasonable, but to actually say with confidence there is no God seems to be about as unreasonable as anything anyone could say. So, if we do believe in a God, it cannot be with our intellectual reason. The person of faith is a fool. The person of no faith who says there is no God is equally a fool. By definition of God, God is way, way beyond us. And yet we think that we can nullify or affirm God's presence and existence with our minds, our thoughts, our knowledge, our experience. Along the line, I'm going to talk about how everybody has a religion. In doing so, I will stretch the definition of religion, obviously, because I'm going to say the atheist is a religious person. Every human being who has a mind, and not everyone can think. I've worked with many like that in my work with the mentally ill, and it's profoundly retarded, but anyone who can think will form a religion. If we stretch the meaning of religion to be a belief system that's deeply held, that guides them, and which can never be proven by any science or rationale. So the atheist is a religious person, and his or her religion is no more manageable or defendable by human reason than is religious faith. I do want to speak to people of all religions and all faith, and I don't judge the soul of an atheist or the souls of other religions, because I do believe that they don't make themselves or their own philosophies, just like I didn't make mine. I was raised in this. Maybe I have a gene that makes me prone to believe in it. I don't know. I can't judge them, and I can't judge myself favorably either. But it's important that we talk about these things, so vitally important. So let me just leave you with this. 2 things. I'm going to write them down now and let you take a deep breath. I think it'd be good not to hear my voice for a couple minutes. 2 things crossed my mind, but I lost the thought. I'm still here. Yeah, I may not be capable of extemporaneous speech anymore. 2 good thoughts came to my mind with which I'd like to close this essay, but they left my mind, and that is the definition of short-term memory loss. Very short-term. There it is. How many people learned to be pilots in this country and then piloted those planes to their own deaths and the deaths of many others on 9/11? What was it, 16 or 18 persons who killed for their faith, for their God, according to their faith. I recalled them out of order, but I did recall them. Let's take this first. Those persons believed in an afterlife and practiced a religion. They were killing for their God, according to their belief in God. Now, hopefully that sounds so far out in your mind that you consider it criminal and even punishable by the most gruesome means. But I want you to take a little moment to recognize what we all have in common as human beings. We all have a religion, even if it's atheism. And if we don't talk about that with each other, if we make nice with each other and avoid religion and politics and social and family circles, we're never going to be able to grow and learn from each other. These are people who were, for other reasons, and there are many, and there have been studies, and there have been theories, and some of them are very good, how a human being can be made into the kind of person to do what they did on 9/11. But there are answers to that question. And for my little bit here, I want to say, those people didn't exactly make themselves the killers they became to be. They had something to do with it. We have some free will, but not total. Just as I couldn't make myself 6'2", there's some things about my development, my intellectual and belief system that I didn't put there in me. These people were vulnerable to a certain school of thought. They were steeped in hatred and a belief that they had the right idea and the right to do what they did. And we have to struggle with that because we too have our beliefs. I want each of us to ask ourselves, upon what are we basing our belief systems? Some people think religion, especially in Northeast America, in which I've lived all my life, religion has become relegated to a corner of the room that is labeled opinion. It's never anything more than opinion. It's what you believe is good for you, but don't try to sell it to me. Each should have his own opinion and not bother others. Well, I don't buy that. We form each other's opinions. The idea that religion is just an opinion and that all religious thought from any human being is equal to any other because no one can scientifically prove anything they're talking about, that itself is a philosophy that they learned from this culture, from a movement that probably began in the Enlightenment and was only exacerbated by technological prowess and scientific advancement, so that we actually put more trust in our own minds and our own knowledge and our own scientific know-how and our own ability to dominate the world, the living world, and protect ourselves and furnish ourselves and power ourselves. And we've become a people of great hubris. Our thoughts about God should not be relegated to opinion. They should be based on sound philosophy, but it always comes down to trust. In whom do you place your trust? Do you believe certain miracles happened? Because we're never going to be able to understand anything, not anything about God, because God is far beyond us, unless God reveals God's self to us. If God chooses to make something about himself understandable, then, only then, will we understand it. So, in whom do you trust? I'm so glad that virtually everyone who's hearing me now, I'm quite sure, would never do anything like those persons who killed on 9/11. But what I want us to understand is we can do a lot of harm indirectly, even without our knowing that we're participating in the doing of harm. We can be more or less, often less, but nevertheless a little bit responsible for so many bad things that happen, especially in a democracy like American, where we have some influence about creating policies that affect people's lives. Our thinking and our belief system makes a difference. It shapes our values. It helps inform us as not just to what is good, but how to obtain what is good and what is required of us in order to participate in obtaining it. I want to close with this, starting to raise my voice. I may as well tell you I have a temper. I may as well admit right now I'm a very opinionated person. These are not my greatest strengths. They can be strong. They can be directed to good, but this is not what I think God wants me to do in this project. God wants me to be calm and loving and not judgmental. And doing the project like that to the best of my ability is going to help me become more the kind of person God wants me to be. As I said, I was raised a Christian, and I am now talking on number 2 before you. I know that some people were raised under Islam, and some were raised under Judaism, and someone raised under the Baha'i faith, and many other faiths out there. And some were raised in atheistic households and went through experiences and maybe a college or maybe a seminar where the atheist really touched them deep down, even beyond their formative years, so that it moved their heart, and the heart trumps the mind. So I take no credit if any of my religious thinking is good. And I judge no one whose religious thinking may be bad. But still, we have to try to think. As a thinking person, as an intellectual, as silly as that it sounds for me to say that about myself, because I'm not that smart and I'm not that well read. But I think a lot. And I try to make sense of the world. And I try to make sense of my faith. And I try to make sense of what I believe, the God I believe in wants me to believe. When I look at something like 9/11, it reminds me of the sensibility of my Christian faith. And I hope that maybe some of you, Muslims or Jews or others, would share with me how you, in your tradition, can make sense of 9/11. How you can answer that question that the atheists raise for all those who could never find justice, who were victims and who cried out, "Where is God?" How can there be a God who's all good, all powerful, and all loving? I hope some of you like that, atheists, other religions, agnostics, would deal with 9/11, and maybe you'll share that with me. Again, I don't promise any responses, but I'll share with you me. It's funny because there are many kinds of Christians in the world. I've been closely associated with Roman Catholic and United Methodist, and I've seen how differences in religious thought and the application and interpretation of what we all consider holy scriptures can actually divide people. I've watched the United Methodist Church divide recently over the issue of homosexuality. And way back when in the Reformation, people of great intellect and wisdom and faith nevertheless disagreed severely and broke away from the Catholic roots and started the Protestant movement, which has resulted in the birth of many, many different Christian denominations. The Protestants have the cross. The bare cross. And the Catholics have the crucifix. The one with Jesus on it. It's a pretty big difference. They all call themselves Christians. They all are Christians. One believes and has created a completely different central symbol for their faith. I'm okay with either one. And maybe because my heart trumps my mind and I was raised Catholic, that I have a little preference for the crucifix, and I'll tell you why. We will never have a good answer for how we can believe in a good, all-loving, all-powerful God when there is such evil on the earth that hurts so many people. We'll never have a good answer for that. I've tried to figure it out. I've read some great minds who have tried to figure it out. All the answers kind of, even if they satisfy you in the beginning, they leave you disappointed after much thought. But the God in whom I believe, this Jesus of Nazareth, not only joined us as a human to go through life as we do, but he suffered what I believe is the worst kind of suffering anyone can suffer, which is to suffer terribly at the hands of other human beings who want you to suffer terribly. In other words, he was tortured. And I'll never have an answer for why there's such suffering in the world, but it satisfies me to know that the God in whom I believe knows what it's like to suffer the worst kind of thing a human being can suffer. Jesus on that cross forever reminds me that God suffers with us, that God knows all about human suffering and even involved his or herself in it. It's not an answer to the cry of the atheist or the tortured victim or the innocent starving child. But at least it helps us to know that there might be some kind of reason that God has helped to create this world as it is in all its terror. I say help to create because we as humans are little creators, you know. We've advanced to the point where we must now take some responsibility for the world as it is and the worst of the evil it presents. We have helped to create this world. And whatever your belief is, I hope it calls you to do and to become the kind of person that can help build a better world. There is good and bad religion in every religion. You will hear me say that over and over. There is good and bad religion in every religion, and everyone has a religion. It's best we study ourselves and our belief systems and make sure that we don't fall into the trap of clinging to a belief system that only fortifies the evil in this world. I don't judge the souls of those who created or became the killers on 9/11, but I judge their religion. They got it wrong. No good can come out of that kind of behavior. The ends don't justify the means. All we have control over, my friends, are the means, not the ends. Tomorrow, I'm going to pick myself up. I'm going to ask forgiveness for what I did wrong today. And I'm going to accept God's forgiveness. That's the kind of God in whom I believe. The one who offers forgiveness. And wants me to take another step in the right direction on a life journey toward a certain goal. I don't know what your goals are in life, but I know what mine is. It's defined by the God in whom I believe, and I believe your goals are defined by your God. Even the atheist has a religion, and his or her goals are defined by it because they're defined by his or her values, which are defined by belief systems. I hope your belief system helps you along your journey to becoming a better co-creator for the sake of a better world. One step at a time. I may talk forever, but I've got to stop. I've gone over my request of anyone who might want to listen to me. I cannot demand that much time from a modern person. And so I will stop, but you will hear me talk about the Lord's Prayer in the future. It goes on for several lines, but only one little line talks about the kind of prayer that I hear over and over again, ad infinitum, to the point of nausea. It's the prayer for my own needs and my own wants. In the Lord's Prayer, there's only a couple words to sum up all of those needs and wants. Give us this day, notice it's us, not me, our daily bread. This day, give us bread for this day. What are you praying for? Can you accept knowing that you'll only have bread for this day? Can you limit your prayers for your own welfare to just this one day? Or do you pray for more security, more happiness, more guarantees than this day? If you're like me, you do. But if you're like me, you know that's not exactly right. God's will is way beyond any individual's will or welfare. God's love is unconditional, which means God loves me no more than the 9/11 killers. So the proclamation of the unconditional love of God is perhaps the biggest proclamation in the Christian tradition, but it cannot stand alone, because Jesus wanted us to understand the severe nature of the consequences, the negative consequences, if we do not take our next step in accordance with God's will, which is for the whole world at the same time, not for just us, and not for just us first. Wow. Knowing that my religion teaches that makes me feel very humble right now, because I know how far short I fall of that holy standard put before me by the God who said, look, I've been there. I know what it's like to suffer the worst. Now follow me and we'll get out of this place together. My friends, thank you for listening, and it's nice to know at least someone's there. But remember, I'm not here to please anybody. I won't lose a job if I don't preach right or the way people want me to. I'm here as a truth seeker, and I'm sharing with you a lifetime of thought and where it's brought me, because I think there's some truth in it. It's not based on my thinking alone. My notion of truth has been informed and supported by my experience and my reflection on my experience, but it is the foundation of my idea of truth was revealed to me through other people at other times in other centuries. And they admitted it wasn't from their own minds. It was God revealing himself to them. Whatever your beliefs are today, I hope they're grounded in something that was miraculously revealed to you or someone you trust. Someone whose testimony you trust. It's the only good foundation for a good religion. And it's important, vitally important, that we have a good religion. If 9/11 doesn't convince you of that, then you don't understand that those men acted according to their religious belief. And we too can do good or harm only because we act according to our religious belief. Whatever that religion is, even atheism. I need a breath and I need to shut up. If I say I wish the best for you, I mean the very best. and I believe you already have it. The unconditional love of God. May it fill your heart and guide your every thought and action. And create in you a humility and holiness that makes the world a better place. Good night, and to you, good thinking.